and this will be recorded as well as live stream via Facebook on the Ohio Sierra Club page. So as this is getting started, I'd like to say welcome to everyone that is joining us within the Zoom, as well as those that are on Facebook Live and those that will be watching this later via YouTube. We are so glad that you're able to join the Ohio Environmental Justice Speaker Series. This is our speaker series for the month of September, which is held on the third Thursday of every month, except for November and December. So we're coming rapidly approaching our close, but before we get there, we have our just phenomenal speaker that's going to be introduced to you in a few moments by Ms. Veronica Powell. So I am going to leave this in her gracious hands. Thank you all so very much for coming.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, as Chaz had said, for joining us today. I have the honor and the pleasure of introducing you to Ms. SeMia Bray. SeMia is a Black environmental leader. She's a part of the association. She works with the Carey Consulting Group. One of the things about her is that she is a strategic business consultant and a thoughtful leader with a passion for cross-sector knowledge exchange and facilitating real conversation that engage leaders in innovative thinking. So for nearly about 30 years, she has provided consulting service in the private, manufacturing, and nonprofit sector. She's a veteran of the U.S. Army National Guard, and where she honorably served for about 6 years. Her work focused on intersection of equity, democracy, and the environment allows her to serve on numerous committees, task force, and coalition, ranging from the Black Environmental Leaders Association, as I said, to the Sierra Club, as well as the Ohio Climate Justice Forum. She's also the granddaughter of the Great Migration. I've known SeMia now for a few years, and she's just a wonderful person, a fabulous speaker, and she's very passionate about the work that she does. So that's why I'm so honored and pleased to be able to introduce you to my friend, Ms. SeMia Bray.
Well, thank you, Veronica and Chad, and to each and every one of you who are joining us in this webinar or on the live stream, or if you're watching this by recording. I say we see you, we appreciate you, and we're glad that you decided to spend your time, invest your time with us today. As Veronica said, one of the things, there's many things that I do and have done. However, the one that for today's conversation, I'm going to say is most important to me is the fact that I am a granddaughter of the Great Migration. And so what do I mean by that? I start by telling you that in the early 60s, my grandmother chose to leave everything that she owned, loved, and knew in Laurel, Mississippi, put her 5 children into a pickup truck, and drove north. And as she drove north, she did not have anybody here to meet her. She did not have a reserve of funds or a program that would pave her way, but yet she came anyway. She chose to exercise her agency to come to the North because what she saw in the Jim Crow South was a future that she could not believe and refused to accept would be the future that her future generations would have to endure. And so she made that journey. And as she made that journey, it is because of her courage that I can sit here before you today, accomplished and accomplishing many of the things that I am able to do because of her sacrifice. I can sit here today and say to you that I have a daughter who recently graduated honors Yale University with no debt and is currently doing a fellowship at Princeton University. Because of her sacrifice, I can tell you that the trajectory of our family's success all hinged on that decision that she made that day. And so last night I had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Percival Everett, who is an Innisfil Wolf Award winner for his book, The Trees. And we were talking about racialized violence. And inside of that, one of the things that we talked about is what's in a name? Why is a name important? It's because by saying the name of people, by remembering the sacrifices, not only of those who have gone before us, but those who have paved the way so that we could be who we are today. So I will say her name, Elmamie McGee Thompson. It is her shoulders and those of so many others that I stand on and allows me to stand before you today. So I'm pleased to be able to just have this very intimate, close conversation with the audience today. What I promise you is I will be authentic, I will be vulnerable, I will be open, and I will be honest. And I hope that we can enjoy that carpet ride together.
So, Ms. SeMia, can you share with us how you became involved in the equal justice activism?
Sure. So environmental justice came to me. As I shared, my grandmother made that transition. I actually like to say that I think I was born into environmental justice. It wasn't something that I chose, it was something that chose me. And any of us that are in leadership, we understand that notion that sometimes things and circumstances, they choose you. And sometimes you wrestle with that, like, it's like, I don't want to do that. I would like to, sit still, sit quiet and not say anything. However, as I think about my grandmother and I think about others, like Maya Angelou, who said, when a person shows you who they are, believe them, right? And all those other pioneers within the justice movement, how could I not, right? So the other thing around environmental justice that really inspired me was that my grandfather actually was a farmer and he raised beagles. And so he was a farmer and a hunter. And that's not necessarily something that people think about when they think about people of color, but he was. And he also, back in the 70s, I remember him riding around on his bicycle and he would collect bottles, glass bottles and cans, and he would recycle them. And I would also say that, for any of those who know the word hand-me-downs, reduce, reuse, and recycle as far as clothing has been a part of families of color for a very long time. And so the environmental justice specifically movement, I learned about that shortly after college. And then I realized that I'd been an environmentalist the whole time. If we really, really go back now, Veronica, really, really go back 400 years ago, Africans were enslaved because of our ability to understand the environment and to make things grow. It was also an economic, mainly an economic, but what was the economics? It was free labor for working the land. And so much so that our ancestors were actually transported from Africa to the diaspora, which included the United States, to grow and work the land to the benefit of others within the United States. And so environmental justice to me really speaks to things that are spoken of like in the 1619 Project, where we really take a strong, authentic look at our history as Americans, and we are all Americans, and say, have we really told the entire story? Because this country was built in many ways at the hands of people of color, specifically African Americans, and others as well. So environmental justice includes all of that for me. It includes the labor, it includes the economic component, it includes the working of the land. It also includes the environments where decisions were made to build factories near communities where people of color lived, because there was not the organization. And so people could actually build these things and not have much opposition to it, to the detriment, the health detriment. And one comes to mind for me is Lincoln Heights. So I'll tell you a story about Lincoln Heights. Lincoln Heights is the first African-American founded city on this side of the Mason-Dixon line. And in that city, they formed 76 years ago. After lots of hurdles and lots of fights and lots of sacrifice. 74 years ago, a gun range was erected just on the other side of the corporation line. So that meant that this gun range, this outdoor gun range, was not in their jurisdiction, but yet the members who had already fought and sacrificed so hard to just form their city, were subjected to, and here we are 76 years later, are still being subjected to gunfire all day long from sunup to sundown. We're talking noise pollution. We're talking the lead, 70 some years plus of lead going into the soil, which also poisons the water table, which also infects, so it's the sound, and it also has a psychological effect on all the residents of Lincoln Heights. Can you imagine all day long hearing, and I'm not talking about just handguns. This is every type of gun that the local police department, FBI, CIA, and the military all utilize this gun. So any kind of weapon that they might be using that they need to practice in that community is being practiced at that location. So when you begin to know that there are stories about communities like that, they did it right. They went through the paces. They made the sacrifices. They became a city. And out of spite of the people of that time, they built that gun range right next to their corporation limit where they could have no control over it. Then on the other side of that, they built a highway, which brings air pollution. And then on the other side of that, they built a corporate park, right? And guess what's on the other side of the corporate park? A nice suburban community that has now been shielded from the noise and all of that, but the gun range is actually in that suburban community. So those are the types of stories that in my work, we are able to uplift and to say, it wasn't right 75 years ago. And I'm really grateful that today we live in a world where we do talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Mm-hmm. And so it gives those who are in leadership today, who not only have the political ability and capacity, but we hope the political will to move that gun range. The residents there have suffered for 76 years.
So yeah, and I think those are the things that people don't think about and don't talk about. And so I'm glad that you're bringing that to light. And so I'm quite sure that played some part in you becoming part of the Black environmental leaders. So can you tell us a little bit more about their mission and their vision and the work that is done through the Black environmental leaders?
Sure. So, to that end, I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm just gonna be honest, right? As a, I guess, byproduct of how we've all been socialized, right? There's certain organizations that get more and certain organizations that don't. And so inside of that, Black organizations tend to be on the second side, door number 2 of that, Organizations you don't quite get as much, right? So you'll see funding where majority organizations may get millions of dollars, and then you'll see Black, Indigenous, people of color organizations that are working at the same tables, in the same rooms, having the same conversations, will get $100,000. And so let's just look at that. That's a 10-to-1 difference. And when we look at the economic state of our country, what we see, they say, white households versus Black households, is specifically as a statistic, is 16 times more. And so we can begin to see how that can happen when even in the environmental space, you see those kinds of disparities in allocations of funds, right? And so that being the case, in 2017, a group of BIPOC environmentalists, and that is representing every area of the environmental movement. We're talking the built and the natural environment. We were brought together, and what the first thing that I know I realized in that room was, wow, I didn't know this many people of color were involved in the environmental space, because we just weren't seeing one another, because far too often we are the only one or not in the room at all. And so we, through that, decided that we would continue to talk, to continue to support and build upon that relationship, and eventually started an organization called Black Environmental Leaders Association. And I add association to that because that's where the power is. The power is in the fact that we are associated with one another, not to do harm, but to make sure that the harm that is done to us as African Americans and Indigenous and people of color within the environmental space and with society writ large, that there's a place that we can come for renewal, for healing, for support, and for strengthening, because it's a full-time job. And so the mission of the Black Environmental Leaders Association is we are aligned as stewards of the natural and the built environment. And we work collectively to provide that forum for community environmental education, which can serve as a basis for a deeper understanding, like what we're doing today, and commitment to land, water, air, transportation, and energy issues. And we do this through the lens of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so that's the mission of the organization. And if someone is interested in learning more, or even interested in becoming a member, it is a member-supported organization. I think they can share that in the chat. The website is blackenvironmentalleaders.org. And yes, those two L's are next to each other, and it's okay. Some people get nervous about that. It's like, did you mean to put two L's there? And it's like, yeah.
Like, yeah, you did. So can you talk a little bit more about the BIPOC community and their engagement, and how individuals can be engaged in the environmental movement?
Sure. I say everybody is involved in the environmental movement anyway. If you breathe air, if you eat food, and if you drink water, you're already involved in the environmental movement. And so I would say to any person, regardless of the shade of humanity that they happen to be born with, we need people everywhere. We need folks as advocates. We need folks to be in political office to help set the legislation that governs how we address clean air, clean water, and land that doesn't poison the food that we eat. We need people to be lobbyists, right? To help guide that. We need people to be grassroots activists. What our world tends to do is say that BIPOC community members tend to be grassroots, and that's kind of our place, which is a larger societal conversation, right? Since 4 years ago, when African Americans specifically have been enslaved, there's been this notion that we should know our place. And in knowing our place, that means we should stay in our place. And when we don't stay in our place, then there are repercussions as consequences, as the children say. And those repercussions and consequences show up as violence. Now you say, okay, people don't do lynching anymore, and people don't do, well, there's different ways to enact that kind of harm. It happens economically. Why, I don't like the way you talked in that meeting, so I'm not going to fund your organization anymore. I know I told you I was going to fund it, but I'm going to change the amount now. I'm just, funders are just fickle. There's other ways to enact violence. There's meetings that people have, and they just kind of forget to invite, you know,
Everybody to the table.
Yeah, or speaking of tables, you know, there's this notion of let's go find people to invite to our table. And so inherent in that is this idea that the table belongs to only a certain subset of folks, when in fact, we all breathe air, we all drink water, and we all eat food from the land that is grown around us. And so that table actually belongs to all of us. And so, you know, I'd say to all people, consider the language, because language gives power and it takes power. And power, truthfully, I hear people talk about power all the time, especially when I'm in the rooms that I'm in. And as people are talking about power, everybody has power. So that gets back to the notion that I was talking about when I said, stay in our places, right? Everyone has power to exercise their agency and to decide what they will and will not participate in. However, we've been socialized to believe that only certain people have power, and we must wait for the who said of the grandest magnitude to bequeath us with that power. Then it's our place to say something. Then it's okay for us to express ourselves. And, you know, let me say this, I forgot to say this at the beginning. The opinions and statements that I make in this particular video are mine. They are not of any particular organization. And so I don't want anybody feeling itchy that I'm representing their organization. I am representing myself, SeMia Bray, and the lived experience that I have. My lived experience is different than others, and each one here has just as viable or valuable life experience as I have. However, you know, the committee has asked me today to come and share a little glimpse into my life experience. And so I take full credit for everything that I say, will say, and have said in this conversation.
Thank you for saying that. And part of that is knowing that this is a conversation. And Chad has put in the chat that, you know, if there's something that you have questions about or something that you want to interject, please feel free to put it in the chat. If you want to verbally ask a question, raise your hand and we'll see if we can also allow you to ask that question, you know, directly to SeMia. So SeMia, as we're talking about the different communities, and the one thing that we look at is just purposeful work, the purpose of work and the purpose of working in coalitions or groups, and how do others get involved, and talk a little bit about, you know, the Ohio Climate Justice Fund, and just try and tie all of that into the work that you've been doing, the work that you see, and just how we all can be engaged and how we need allies to work with us as we go through these things.
Yeah. So that's a lot, but fortunately I do a lot. I am, if you haven't been able to figure it out, I am a purpose-driven person. I told you guys that, you know, this would be, you know, some moments of vulnerability. About 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And prior to that, I was already a driven person, right? I was in the military, I owned a business, I did this, I did that. You know, I've always been a purpose-driven overachiever. I am also the firstborn, right? So, I've always been a little bossy. I kind of came here that way. So, and I laugh at myself about that because, you know, I don't shy away from it. It's like I have ideas, I share them. And sometimes I sit back and listen, but most times people want to hear what I have to share. So I do. So, purpose-driven. One of my favorite poets says, do the work that you do as though you were doing it for your beloved. Do your work as though you were doing it for your beloved. I carry that with me everywhere because sometimes the work that we do as environmentalists is hard. And it gets harder when you add other layers of differentiators to that, right? So coalition is important. I learned very early in my career. I actually went to the Cleveland School of Science. For whatever reason, it's just the luck of the draw. I have always been really quick with science and math. Always have been. I'm a total data nerd when it comes to energy and all of those kinds of things. And so in the 11th grade, I was fortunate to be working actually at NASA Lewis Research Center in the 10 by 10 wind tunnel building, doing research and doing testing on the space shuttle. And I was doing that in the 11th grade. And I loved the work. However, what I had not been prepared for is the environment that I would be working in. And so for anyone that has seen the movie Hidden Figures, I was in the 80s, so it was a few years after the 60s. So there were a couple things different, but sometimes you just don't talk about things, but they're still not as different as you think they would be. And so for me as an 11th grader, working in NASA in the 10 by 10 wind tunnel, working on doing studies and doing work on the shuttle, I had all the capacity and the understanding, and I dare say my little youthful synapses was moving a little quicker than some of my colleagues. But yet what I didn't have, I wasn't prepared to be a young African-American 12th, 11th grader working in an office with older white men who were in their 40s and 50s, who were smoking cigars, because you could smoke at that time, who were smoking cigars in the workplace. And I have asthma, so that was an issue, but nobody even asked or cared because that's what they did. And the things that they were talking about in the office. They were talking about their grandchildren. They were talking about going on their summer vacations. And not that those things were bad, not that they were purposely being exclusionary to me, but inside of that, I exercised my agency and I didn't go back. I didn't continue. Now, you say, well, SeMia, what does that have to do with collaboration? What it has to do with is this. I didn't go back because I felt like I was the other. I felt like I didn't belong there. I absolutely belonged there. I left there wishing I had someone to talk to who understood what my experience was and who could guide me through that. And in that space and place, I didn't have that. And so what I decided to do was to become a part of that voice that would be that for future generations. Just as my grandmother had exercised her agency and became that voice for us to be able to actually get college degrees and get educated, and dare I say, learn to read, because we are not that far, people, from a time in the United States where people who looked like me were not even allowed to learn to read. We are only 1, 2, 3 generations away from that being a standard practice here in the United States. And so for that sacrifice, leaving that NASA experience, I decided to be a part of that support system for others who were coming behind. And so inside of there, what I learned early on is there are some rooms that I go in just because of the fact that I am Black, I am a woman, and I am a type A personalities. People feel like that is not my place and they get mad because I'm in the room. So I learned early on in my career to always partner and collaborate with white men and white women who sometimes they might need to be the one that says it because it's more important that we get the done, whatever we're trying to get done, then I say it. So it could have been my idea, because I don't shy away from the fact I am a very intelligent person and I have always been intelligent and I have always been smart. And I've always sometimes seen things a lot faster than other people seen them. And that's not me just being arrogant. That's fact proven with evidence. So I've learned that sometimes I have to give the message to somebody else so they can carry the message. And when they carry the message, it's received.
Absolutely.
So that's the importance of collaboration. The importance of collaboration is that everybody has something to contribute, and depending on where you're going with it and what you're trying to accomplish, send the best person in the room to accomplish it. Now, we're making progress in that area, but dare say there are still people who couldn't hear the message from me because of something I have absolutely no control over, and that is the shade of my skin and well, I guess now we do have control over the sex, but the original one, yeah, I have no control over the fact that I was born female.
Now, Tim asked a question, saying that he's a white environmental educator, often working with majority Black classes.
Yes.
Do you have any suggestions for the type of activities or language I could use to express the idea you were saying before about how they already have that power?
Yes. I would say, who is this, Tim? Okay, to Tim, I would say people are people are people, no matter what their shade of humanity. So how you would talk to any person is how you should talk to your students. This equity conversation, since we've kind of been hyper focused on it, it lends us to believe that somehow we need to do something different because somebody is Black, or because somebody is Latinx, or because somebody is Asian. Barring a language difference, right? That's the only exclusion. Like if somebody speaks a different language and their English language might be impaired, barring that, or their ability to comprehend may be impaired. I say, don't change it just for that. Treat all people as all people. If there are Black people who can grasp it quickly, and there are white people who can grasp it quickly. There are Black people who will take them a little bit longer, and there are white people who will take it a little longer. Meet that person where they are. One of the things I learned early in my career is I try as best as I can, whenever I am meeting with somebody, to treat them as though I would treat the President of the United States. If the President of the United States showed up in my living room right now, how would I do? How would I show up? How would I treat that person? There's a level of muster of presence that we would bring if the President of the United States showed up in our house. If we could do it for the president, we could do it for anybody we talk to. Bring that level of presence with whomever you are communicating with as a student in your class. Meet them where they are and speak to them, as the Platinum Rule says, treat others how they would like to be treated. Not how we would want to be treated, but how they would want to be treated. Now that's a little bit more work, because now we got to pay attention, right? We got to really think about it. The person isn't a monolith, we got to really think about it. We got to really be present with that person. But I guarantee you, you will see great success with that approach, not only with Black students, with white students, with Latinx students, biracial students, and any other student, LGBTQI, any student. That approach will get you great success.
You just said a whole mouthful, SeMia, right there. I mean, honestly, because, you basically said it doesn't matter who you are, if you just meet anybody where they're at, because everybody is at different levels, then things go a lot smoother. So what challenges as a Black female, and Tim, thank you so much for that question, because it really leads right into my next question, as far as a Black woman, what challenges do you see in being a part of the environmental movement?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it before. As we talk about equity and we talk about race in the United States, it's this lingering lesson that all of us have been taught, and maybe we didn't take a class to learn it, but we've all been taught it. And that is that somehow, because of the hue or the shade of someone's skin, that somehow they automatically are less than. And so for me, like I said, I've always been a very intelligent person, and I've had people really try to push that down, understand you're going to get in trouble if you really show how smart you truly are. That's probably been the biggest one. I would say also with the race conversation is always an economic conversation. I mean, we like to keep it over here because it's like, nobody wants to talk about the economics, but it's like, how does the money get distributed? At the end of the day, who gets the resources and who doesn't? And it doesn't have to be all. And it doesn't have to be just the talented 10. So what do I mean by the talented 10? We've all been taught that within this racialized America that we live in, that if you have probably about 20 to 30% of people of African American or other BIPOC representation who receive some benefit, college education, GIBO, whatever it might be, that, look, see, there's an example. But what we forget is all of the others who don't even get an opportunity, even try to participate in these things. And even like now, even in times where we have great abundance, you know, there's been some federal legislation that has been passed. We won't get into the details of that around the environment, but inside of that legislation, it speaks to things like, you know, tax credits. Well, in order to get a tax credit, one must owe taxes. Well, in order to owe taxes, one must make enough income to try to figure out, how do I save taxes? And so inherent in there, even though it's more equitable than it has ever been in the past, and it is definitely a step forward, and I'm very grateful for that step forward, there is still much work to do. Still much work to do in that area.
Okay. Well, I know from knowing you for a minute now that one of the things you're passionate about are the rise of the electric vehicle.
Oh, yes.
And so you get super excited and talking about that. So can you share a little bit about the electric vehicles and your mindset on that and how you think it would benefit us?
Sure. So I'll tell you a couple quick things. One is even though I do this work and I advocate for electric vehicle, I'm going to be just completely transparent and honest with you guys. Not that I'm not honest anyway, but I'll just accentuate the honesty. I would not be an electric vehicle driver today if it hadn't been for my daughter. So in our household, what we do, a tradition that we do, is I believe in independence, and I believe in, you know, young people exercising their agency and their leadership. And so when my children, I have 4 of them, when they turn 16, they get a vehicle for their 16th birthday. That's you know, you get your good grades, you be a good child. When they were little, I said, your job is to be a good baby so that people will keep you while mama is at work, right? You go to school, you get good grades, that's your job. You a baby, you got a job. Be a good baby so people like having you around. And so when they turn 16, as a reward of moving into young adulthood, they get a vehicle. And so my youngest daughter, you know, was like, what do you want? She says, I want an electric vehicle. So she's, you know, I was like, oh, she's listening, baby's listening. And I said, oh, you want a hybrid, right? We all have been socialized. You didn't know until the moment, right? Hybrid. She says, no, Mom, I want an electric vehicle. And so we found her a little Chevy Spark EV, or as we affectionately see, Spark EV, right? So we started with this little EV. Now, true story, you guys, when we got this little Spark EV, it has about 100 miles that you can go on a charge. Okay, smart me, right? I had ordered the vehicle, but the vehicle arrived before the charging station arrived. I was really proud of myself. I had done the research. I found the charging stations near our home. But what I didn't realize is that when I made it to one of the charging stations, somebody who I'm going to just allow me to embellish, an internal combustion engine vehicle driver, ICE vehicle driver, had run over the charging edge and had broken it off. So if you imagine your cell phone charger and the tip that goes into your phone broken off. So now here I am with my cute little EV standing at the charging station, and I can't charge because somebody's broken it off. And the charging station in my garage, he's not gonna install until 2 days from now. And I have all of 5 left because I've been driving around showing my people, hey, we got an EV, right? So now I have a choice. Where's my closest charging station? My closest charging station is 5 miles away. I have 5 miles of charge. What do I do? True story, people. This is what I did. I drove home because I was really close to the charging station. And I said, I'm going to get up at dark 30 in the morning. And I'm going to do the best that I can with heels to get to that charging station before I run out of charge, because that's my only option at this point. So I head out and I'm driving. It's 4 miles, 3 miles. Okay, when it gets to 3 miles, EVs start doing things like this. Turn off the radio, turn off the air conditioning. So I roll the windows down because it's in the morning. The other thing that EVs do, though, is when you go down hills, they will regenerate or they will recharge the battery a little bit, just a little bit. So I start going down as many hills as I could find on my way to this charging station. I kid you not, I make it all the way to the parking lot, because it was in front of a Walmart. The charging station was by a Walmart. So I make it into the development of where the Walmart is. I can see the charging station. I can darn near touch the charging station. And then the car just stopped. That is the moment that people fear when they think about buying an EV. Let me tell you, I survived it. I am alive. I am happy. And two things. One is because it doesn't have an engine, it doesn't have transmission, I was able to push it. So I pushed it. And when I started pushing, there was an incline. And as I rolled down the incline, you know, that car charged a little bit. So I jumped in and I drove over to the charging station and then I charged. So lessons from that little experience. One is there is survival if you happen to run out of charge on a vehicle. That is the biggest determinant that I see of people like, I can't get it because I might run out of charge. The second thing that I learned is most people drive an average of about 40 miles a day. And if there's a regular charging source, you're not going to run out of miles. In my case, the charging, had that station been open, I wouldn't have run out of charge. Our infrastructure still has some growing to do. That's part of the reason that I sit on the Climate Action Plan committee for NOACA, is to help incentivize and advocate for those charging stations being placed as many places as possible, just like a gas station is right now. And I also say for those who are considering driving an EV, you would never drive your ICE vehicle and let it go all the way to fumes. Well, some of us do, but not all of us, right? So you get low, you charge, you fill it with gas. You get low, you fill it with gas. Same thing with an EV. Every night now, when I drive my EV, and after that, good part of the story, I did get another EV, so I actually drive an EV now. So we have two, my daughter's and mine, because here's what I learned. I replace the air filter, tires, brakes, and windshield wiper fluid. Yeah, my maintenance costs went. And it was only an additional $20 or $30 a month for us to charge out of our garage on the 220 line. So that happened right before the gas prices started going up. And so right now I just kind of drive past the gas stations and I'm like, whew, so grateful.
So
so I say, you know, go ahead.
Are you saying that you're laughing at us because we don't, many
No,
of us
no,
made
no,
that
no.
transition?
Would never.
Are you encouraging us?
I'm encouraging you. I'm
Thinking about it.
encouraging you to think about it. You know, like I say to people, don't hurt yourself, right? Don't go out and try to buy an EV tomorrow, because the infrastructure, like I said, I'm going to just be open and honest with you. The EV infrastructure, if you do a lot of driving, it may not be the time just yet. But if you do what most people do, 40 miles a day, if that, 25 to 40 miles a day, you could actually be fine with an EV. You know, my daughter, she gets everywhere she needs to go. She gets to school, she gets to work, she goes out with her friends. She has the same active young adult life that she would have had if she'd been driving in a ICE vehicle. So, and if we have to go long distance, I just rent a car for that 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
You know, until the infrastructure builds up a little bit more. So I guess no, I would never laugh at anyone about their vehicle choice. I just say, you don't have to be afraid of it. It is real and it is a tremendous savings. We've seen some statistical numbers that show, depending on what your car note is, when you look at the maintenance cost of an EV, it's significantly lower to own an EV than it is to own an ICE vehicle. And also it's better for the environment. And our auto manufacturers, I don't know if you all have noticed more EV commercials on TV. This year alone, the auto manufacturers are releasing like 20 plus new EV models, and each one of them are learning from the experiences like I told you. So they're adding innovations like range extenders, which is just a little small gas tank that will keep your EV battery charged for another 100 miles if you're somewhere where you can't get to a charging station. So that would have eliminated my little sparky EV experience. They're adding things like, over the weekend, I was at an event where I needed to charge my car. There was no charging stations around. Ford now has this F-150 Lightning that you can actually charge another car from that F-150. So these kinds of innovations are coming forward in the EV world. And the price of the cars aren't a whole lot more than what one would pay for a new vehicle anyway. So yeah, I say don't be afraid. Explore it, know your level of comfort. And at minimum, the vehicle that you're driving now, when it reaches its life expectancy, really consider moving into an electric vehicle. Because from a business perspective, I will say this, the auto industry is already moving in that direction. The consumer market is moving quicker than the auto industry can get ready for us. So I could foresee, I don't have a crystal ball, but I could foresee gas prices beginning to go up because the demand is going to go down. And you don't want to get caught with a 10-year car note on a vehicle that is gasoline dependent in an environment that is shifting to EVs.
Well said. Speaking of that, as we're winding down, because I know we only have a few minutes left, can you talk a little bit about some of the jobs that people can get in energy, as well as how people can get funded? And I'm going to toss like 3 questions together that I have just for the sake of time, if you could briefly touch on each one of them. And also, I know that the Ohio Equity Team is planning a tour.
Yes.
So can you speak a little bit about that tour and any final thoughts that you may have?
Yeah, so I would say for the jobs, so that, we only have a few minutes for the jobs, go to ONET online and look in there. It'll show you a range of clean energy jobs that you could look at. So that's the 30-second answer to that. For the toxic tour, the transformation tour, yeah, I would say if you come to Cleveland, you got to stop by Lakeview Terrace. Also, anywhere in East Cleveland, pick a place, right? It has been so dramatically disinvested in. You will find no shortness of sites in East Cleveland. And then I'd also say the Lakefront Nature Preserve. We are working on a Cheers project there, which would actually add an island out in that outer area of the Lakefront Nature Preserve. The Lakefront Nature Preserve was actually made from dredge material. And so we're working on a project to build another island out in Lake Erie using clean dredge material that could be a recreational place for all peoples. When that initially was presented and built, it was really built as a destination place for the majority community. And as a matter of fact, the highway was built to keep the people who live right next to the highway from coming across, because you got to play Frogger to run across the highway to get to the lake. And so this project is being done in a way that offers green spaces that are being walkable so that you don't have to play Frogger, and that space can now be enjoyed even more fully by all people representing all shades of humanity. So I would say that would be a place to come by too. And then last but not least is another environmental angle that I want to put before you, and that's racialized violence. In Cleveland, there was the lynching of John Jordan in 1911. I would say within that community, not too far from now, Tamir Rice his life was taken far too early. It's the same, not exactly the same spot, but very close to the same location. And even today, the children in that community report that they are personally knowledgeable of about a murder a month in that area. And so environment also includes those things that live, those legacy violence and memories that live in a space and a place that we all feel it in our gut. It's like you go in and say, I don't feel comfortable here. I don't like this place, right? Those things live in a space. And so it's important to A, recognize it, B, acknowledge that it happened, and C, rectify the things that would make it acceptable for it to occur in that community. And so those are locations that I would recommend visiting on the toxic tour in Cleveland.
Thank you for that. Now we do have one other question. Lorraine asks, do you know how charging stations and their locations are determined? would low-income neighborhoods be affected?
So again, I alluded earlier to some work that we're doing as Black Environmental Leaders Association with NOACA. There are organizations like NOACA and others who determine where there's lots of processes and meetings and smart people in rooms. And so we try as best as we could to be in those rooms or make sure that there's representatives in those rooms so that when people are saying, where should we put those? There's somebody in the room that's saying, oh, we need to make sure we put it there, we put it there. And I got it, all fairness, there are, now that equity, diversity, and inclusion is more, dare I say, socially okay to talk about, there are more and more advocates and allies who are also, walking in those rooms saying the question that you did. We got to make sure that that's happening. Mm-hmm. And that's where collaboration comes in place. Is it, somebody they might be, we tired of SeMia and her big old mouth, but they might hear you, Lorraine, say it and say, oh, well, Lorraine said it, well, go with it. At the end of the day, I don't care who said it, just as long as the charger station is in all communities. Mm-hmm. The conversations that I've heard around that, though, and we just push back on it, is things like, well, people in those communities can't really afford an EV, so why would we put a station there, right? You hear things like that. And it's like, yeah, right. Why would you? It's just like when gasoline cars first started, everybody was driving horses. Hey, it's both and, right? Do you wait till all the people have the cars to put the station, or do you put the stations and then people get the cars? It's both and. Mm-hmm. People get the cars and you do the stations. You're doing both. And we have the ability to do that.
Well, thank you so much, SeMia. It's been a great conversation, and thank you all for joining us. I'm gonna actually turn it back over to Chad unless SeMia has any final thoughts that she would like to share with us. Achilles is gonna speak. Achilles has joined us, and so he's gonna come on for a second. But SeMia, before I turn it over to Achilles, is there anything final thoughts that you want to share with the group that has joined us today?
I would just say I greeted you with peace and ease in my heart, and I leave you, my final words would be, as you leave this place, I hope there's been something that has inspired you. Perhaps you're thinking about something a little differently than you did before we had this conversation. And as you leave this place, please go with peace and with ease into the rest of your day.
And I just want to say thank you for being so vulnerable, so open, and so willing to share with us all. It has been my pleasure to be a part of this with you. So thank you. Achilles, we turn it over to you.
Thank you, Saronica. And I will say I'm one step closer to getting an electric car. But I want to start off by thanking Ms. SeMia Bray for being with us today and just coming and sharing all of your knowledge and joining us and having just a robust conversation. I joined a little bit late, but in like 30 minutes, I learned a lot. So thank you so much for just all your great energy that you brought today. I also want to thank our equity team. So I see that Saronica and Chad have been holding down the fort today. So thank you both for being here. It's great to see your faces. And I also want to thank all of you for joining us in this conversation. It's always great to see folks across the state and in Northeast Ohio just come together and have some dialogue around a lot of these important topics within the environmental movement. So thank you for taking your lunch or just time out of your day for being here with us today. And so as we wrap up, because we have like 4 minutes, so I'm not gonna take up too much more of your time today, but I'm gonna post in the chat our feedback link that we post. We have every session. Please, please, please fill that out. If everybody can fill it out today, that would be amazing. We just want to continue to find ways to improve and bring more robust dialogue and speakers like Ms. SeMia here with you today. And the way we can do that is by getting your feedback and your thoughts and ideas. So please do that. Additionally, you did hear SeMia and Saronica talk about our Toxic to Transformation tours. And so what we're going to be exploring is a little bit about what Ms. SeMia shared earlier too. So finding out what's really hindering and has hindered our communities, but what's already in the process to make sure that our communities and our environment is becoming or can become way more healthier. and addressing those issues and exploring that. So please be on the lookout for that. If we don't, we probably do have your email, I'm sure, Chad. But if we do not, please make sure you share that in the feedback form so that we can provide you with some more information. But our tentative date for that to happen is October 11th. So if you want to just kind of save the date for that, and we'll be providing more information. Our next speaker will be on October 20th at the same time in the same bat channel. And so just thank you so much again for all of everything that you all are doing, all of your time, and just enjoy the rest of your day. And if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a little bit, but if not, I will see you soon. Thank you.